Angels, welcome to Set the Stage, episode 5. So, oh my god, it has been a hot minute since I've done an episode. I know! So, I've been in the midst of film school applications, but now I'm finally done, so that's awesome! You are watching Set the Stage, episode 5. Yep, I know, from my last episode, I talked about growing up as an Asian American, some pros and cons and what I've been through, all those things. So if you've not seen that episode, I encourage you to watch it, so don't forget to do that after you see this. So this time we're deep diving into some subjects related to communication. I was a film and media arts major that had a thing for the subject of communication. Like, I love it. I've taken a couple classes and it has changed my life. And it's still possible to do it. If you're at college right now, it's still possible to do it. As long as you're able to get in your requirements and whatnot, just at least take one and boom. At least that's how it did for me. So, okay, it is hard to be good at talking, first off. So it's one of those skills that we spend our whole lives practicing, right? It's not just about saying what is considered right, like saying the right words. It's more of trying to understand each other, especially when brains work differently. So we're going to dive into the subject of communication through the lens of neurodiversity and neurodivergence. So it's basically how brains communicate and how we're able to meet each other in the middle. So we'll be digging into those things. So it's like a little refresher of when I spoke about my neurodivergent experiences. So I'll do a little refresher later, so in the meantime, enjoy the episode. So as I've said before, communication is one of those skills that we spend our entire lives doing. It's not just about saying the right words, but also in a way that we're trying to understand each other as a human being, even when brains work differently. So let's recap a little bit of what neurodiversity is. By definition, neuro meaning brain, well, hence the neuro portion of that word. So it's about the natural diversity in which how the human brain works in terms of how we think, process information, feel, communicate. And it's come to my attention that no two brains are the same and it's not a flaw of anything. It's more of human variation. Neurodivergent people, what can they be like? So neurodivergent, by definition, it is the idea that there are brains that work differently. People with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and many others. So they do communicate in ways that might not match expectations, but those ways are still valid and still creative. And of course, meaningful, without exception. Like, people have fascinating things to say, and fascinating things to write about as well. Like, it's more of a question of trying to notice certain communication patterns and also what works best for the other person that you're talking to. Those are like the baselines of what I've learned throughout the comm classes. You might have heard of communication accommodation theory. Not to be like Kent Menzel or anything. I miss you, Professor. So, yes, he's such a good professor at DePauw. I highly recommend, so if it's any communication concepts that you're interested in, like interpersonal communication, I suggest Dr. Kent Menzel's classes for that. Doesn't matter what major you are, it's worth it in the long run. We did speak of what neurodiversity is, and also neurodivergence, and how those two terms correlate with each other. And now we're going to get into how communication is more than just terms themselves. How many of you have tried to say something clear, but you're like, well, like essentially a loss of words. So it isn't just about saying sentences trying to come out smoothly without using or any of that stuff. Even whatever I say, I sometimes believe I sound delulu or like crazy, or it's like, what if people don't get it? Communication is more than just words themselves, but it also implies to gestures, facial expressions, movement, tone, or even how someone arranges their environment in a way. In this case, for neurodivergent people, eye contact, oh my god, they can get uncomfortable at times, or their body language might not match what you're expecting. That does not mean that they're not listening or that they're not caring about it. They just communicate differently. That's what I'm constantly having to learn as an autistic person myself. So it was those things that I couldn't talk about as a little girl, like as a young teen. But as a post-grad / college student, I've become open about that, even to some friends, some professors. I would say the hardest part is just finding the words. You know, like that cliche statement, actions speak louder than words? Yep, that can imply. I've probably put this in my description, like in my bio, saying visuals and sounds are my navigators. And that does apply to when I'm meeting new people or when I'm just seeing friends. There always is a way to communicate, not just through words, but I utilize visuals and sounds a lot. And that does apply to what I've done as a filmmaker too. At least I would understand from what I've been working on in my film school applications. So, yep, that does make sense. Aside from communication being more than words, but also like through body language, movement, facial expressions, tone, all that stuff. But there's also some environmental related things that people might not get. To any educator or anyone who's interested in specializing helping neurodivergent individuals thrive in a way. So disclaimer, I am not a licensed professional of anything. I'm speaking from both personal experience and also what I've learned as a neurodivergent individual. So when I spoke about my neurodivergence, like tips, like do's and don'ts and reminders, like I was noting general things like what you should do and what you shouldn't do. This one is more adding on to that broad statement of neurodivergence in a way. Like, if you were to watch my Like No Other documentary, you could totally get it. Now we get on to environment, which, oh yeah, and sensory needs too. Those things matter so much as words do too. So communication is in a context, essentially. So like, there's bright lights, loud sounds, crowded spaces. Those, unfortunately, can be harder and overwhelming for autistic and sensory sensitive folks in terms of trying to process of what's being said. Like as for me, as an autistic person, so essentially autism does not run the same. It's just a way of navigating differently. Sure, it can be considered a disability, but the way I viewed it, it's like, so mine's more communication based, so I'm not sensory sensitive or anything. It's just I can be at a loss of words at times, and it takes me a little while to process information. But hey, just because that happens does not mean I cannot do it. Like, people are so quick to assume that, and doesn't that ever bother you? Oh, I'm sure it does. And it should. So here's what I'm trying to say. Let's say you're guiding someone who's on the autism spectrum and they're taking in the environment, and somehow you come to note that they're overstimulated. And so that's where communication can come in. So the best tool isn't just a phrase or two, but more of environment adjusting. So here are some things you could do to accommodate around those sensory sensitive individuals. Like, for example, you could lower background noise or give more time or provide them a calmer space so everyone has the space and time to think and respond. Like, essentially, when you notice, like, for example, bright lights or loud sounds that are too much for individuals with autism, well, because it gets overstimulating to them. And it's obviously not your fault. It's just they're pretty sensitive, like physically and psychologically. Well, it's like there are individuals on the autism spectrum who have sensitive ears. It's like loud sounds bother them, and it just feels like a triggering alarm that just wouldn't shut up. Whenever you're working around accommodations for neurodivergent individuals, you are actually helping them in a way to navigate a space that might not be what's expected of them. there's a lot more to that, but this is the simplest way I can speak about it. Like, it is totally understandable to navigate how they're feeling and also willing to talk some sense into it, like, oh, I see this is hard for you. What can we do to resolve this issue? So, like, you don't just, like, sit there or stand there and watch them suffer. It's like, they even need time to, like, process it all. Even I need time to process mostly words. Essentially, my point is the environment that you surround themselves with matters so much. Like, let's say, you wouldn't want to have a conversation with someone neurodivergent who's sensitive to loud sounds. Like, you don't take them to a cafe, like a crowded or busy cafe, because that gets overstimulating. So what do? You take them to a space where it doesn't seem too loud in a way, and then you just like tell them like, hey, it's okay. I'm here right with you. I'm willing to support you. I'm willing to help you out in any way I can. And I feel that every profession, no matter what field it is, they have to be well trained to help autistic individuals too. And neurodivergent ones, not to minimize anything. Now, don't get me wrong. So showing up to the person who identifies as sensory sensitive or autistic is the very brave thing to do as an educator or for whatever job profession you're in. Criticizing them is the no-no. Like, do not ask, never ever ask, like, why does this person, like, do this? Or, like, the way they, like, for example, like, stim, flap their hands, or as long as you're not being judgmental, that is good. You don't want to, like, just assume that, like, oh, like, they're just, like... So, like, stimming is pretty common among neurodivergent folks, so, like, it's like a self-regulating mechanism and also in addition to expressing an emotion. Pretty common. So, now we're going to get on to the next point. So, communication is not just about adjusting to the environment, but also, you might have heard of the skill active listening. Yep, where you're paying attention, you're reflecting back what you've heard, asking questions. So all of that does matter, but we can make it more neuro-inclusive in a way. Here's what it looks like. So there are some complicated points, but I'll do my best to simplify them in a way that's easy to understand. So what does active listening look like? So it's not just about paying attention and also trying to recall what's heard. There are also ways to ask good questions. So as I mentioned in my neurodivergence episode, where I said don't ask general questions, those are not the great ones to use. So like, as for me, I don't do well with questions that have too much ambiguity. Like, I've been asked a lot, like, hey, what are you doing post-grad? Or that's too much of a jumping thing. It's like, why can't you ask, like, what field I studied in to begin with? It's like certain questions that I encourage people to start with instead of jumping to, like, hey, what are you doing post-grad? And also, what is neuro-inclusivity? So, and that can apply to, for example, giving extra time to process after asking a question. Like, I always need time to process the question and also know how to answer it. And also not interrupting silences, using concrete language instead of using vague terms or vague hints. There are certain phrases that you could also add up to, like, whenever you feel that the question is not providing enough context in a way, you could say, like, it appears to me that, like, let's say I'm talking about something, for example, and then the other person can say, like, it sounds like you're stating blank, blank, blank. And then, does that imply to blah, 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 blah? So, like, when you're asking those kind of questions, it's not doing it to be angry, but also, like, whenever you're, like, trying to clarify, that is a good thing. Clarification, that matters so much, because how many of you autistic folks cannot stand questions that have too much ambiguity? That is so me. And I often felt really bad because, like, it wasn't, like, necessarily choosing to wanting to avoid ambiguous questions, but like trying to have people like, can you be more specific, or like what do you mean, in what way? Like it's like a constant thing that every person has to know. Like it never hurts to clarify. Like instead of just asking like, what do you got going on the rest of the day? Like that's a question I've heard way too much. Instead of saying that, how about you say like, now that you worked out, anything special going on for this week? Like that can apply to like a special occasion, or, and even if it's not so special, like let's say getting together with people, because like that gives the other person more time to understand the question and decide how to answer. At times, my words tend to be slower than my brain. Whenever I'm asked such a general question, it goes in like rapid fire mode, like you really have to answer this now or else you're not gonna have a good conversation. And that can get overwhelming. That gets too much. Here's what you do. Whenever you notice that someone on the spectrum is not really answering right away, well, it's because their brains are taking time to process the information that's given to them, like trying to understand the question and knowing how to answer them. And so what do? You give them more time. Like even if it's completely with not much words, like you just have to like listen in a way. Provide them specific decisions or specific points on what you're trying to do. Like the more specificity there is, the better it is. Perhaps I've said that a bunch of times, but it is true. Or at least you could, it never hurts to say something like, it sounds like you're saying that blah blah blah. Does that match with what you're trying to say? You're essentially following up with that in the conversation, which is super important. And now we get onto code switching. I know, a big one. And that implies to not just people who identify as a different race or ethnicity, but also neurodivergent people too. Code switching, it's like masking in a way, or adjusting the considered neurotypical that is in a way of trying to speak of what's considered normal. I hate that word. I hate that word. Typical, like neurotypical. So, and that can get overwhelming, exhausting, and that becomes too much. And it's just at times the more I'm masking so much, it gets a lot for me to handle, and then it gets like stronger at me. Code switching comes a lot, and the effort to do it is a lot. So instead of expecting the neurodivergent person to do all the adapting, so you have to be willing to shift a little in terms of slowing down your words, clarifying, or even being open to different rhythms, and that implies to different communication styles. It is important to not just be open to the neurodivergent person, but also important to realize that, hey, they need time to understand the question, or they need time to whatever, to adjust so that they don't become overstimulated right away. It's pretty complicated. The way I'm speaking from my view and also how I've handled it, it should make sense. It should make a solid amount of sense. And now we're gonna get into practical moves, like in the moment of the conversation. Okay, so in that time, it is fine to pause, okay? Like I even pause probably a lot because at times my brain might work faster than my words. And if you lose your words, that is okay. You can start with, as I was trying to say, and rephrase it in a way that's much easier to understand. As I was trying to say, because like in the moment when I'm like so locked in a conversation, then I get a distraction that hits, I lose it immediately. And that gets me frustrated. I don't want to say every single time, but also most of the time I do get frustrated over that. It never hurts to say, as I was trying to say, blah, 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 and then say it in a way that sounds more easy to understand. So, and then you could always ask them, does that make sense, or should I say this differently? And even if you're listening, you could utilize phrases like, I can see that this is relevant to you, or it appears that you're feeling this way, blah, blah, blah. So like the more you say like, oh, it sounds like blah, 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 or like, I can see that blah, 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 you're essentially trying to connect to them in a way. Specific questions are the key. So instead of asking, how is your day? I don't like that. My brain does not even like that question. Like, you say, like, what was the best part of the day? That gives a clearer path for autistic individuals to respond. Or like, how did that event go for you? So like, whenever you ask, like, would you like to talk about it? And if they're okay with it, then great. If not, you give them space. And that is the concept of boundaries. Many people have not set a freaking boundary in their life. So like, if you've got family or whoever that are not really understanding what you're trying to do, they don't have to get it, and that's perfectly okay. As long as they don't interfere with the boundaries that are set among neurodivergent individuals, that is good. When I say specific questions, you want to add more context instead of relying on general, like, how are things going? Or like, any best parts of the week? Or what are you struggling with during the week? Would you be okay sharing that? It never hurts to ask. Are you okay to talk about this? Or like, would you be willing to share this with me? And if they say yes, then it can go on. But if they say no, you just respect their boundaries. And now we're going to dig into some common ground and relationships. Wow, another big one. Okay, now we're on to common ground, another big one. I'm pretty sure you know what common ground is. Essentially, so when connection implies to communication, it's not just a shared interest. It's not just about perfect communication, but more of what's the common ground between you and this person? Is it like the same interests, like same taste in food, music, stories, and of course, respecting boundaries. I cannot stress that enough. Whenever I feel pressured to do something, like by someone that's clearly crossing the boundaries, like everybody else, there are things that I would do and things that I wouldn't do. Neurodivergent or not, everyone, every single one of us, they want to feel understood, accepted, and included for who they are, instead of trying to be something that they're not. As I've explained in my film school apps, that I have stories that ask the question like, what's the point of trying to be something you're not? Like, have you seen the movie How to Train Your Dragon? There's a live action and there's an animated one. So like the story goes, this boy named Hiccup, so like he thought he's destined to become a Viking like everybody else in his village, but it's like deep down he's not meant to be a killer. So like all this time he had to hide his true identity in order to fit in with other people, but it all comes to his moment of like, what's the point of him trying to be something that he's not? Like, he's not meant to be a killer, he's trying to state that dragons are meant to be friends, not enemies. That's a little movie talk there, but if you've not seen it, go see it. Like, that movie, it's one of those movies that changed my life. I remember seeing it when I was around probably 7 or 8 years old, and I still see it as a kid, as an adult. It's just such a wonderful movie, a really positive movie, and very uplifting. And it's one of the movies that I look at whenever I feel down or when I'm just like inspired in a way. Definitely one of the big reasons of why I've gotten into filmmaking even more. So every single one of us wants to feel included, understood, and also accepted just for being themselves and being original and authentic instead of trying to mask. We're supposed to treat differences in communication as something to learn from instead of fixing. And that way, the relationships become more richer in that way. And I know relationships, they can be hard to build and also hard to maintain, even for me as a neurodivergent person. Like, I still find friendships hard to maintain because of time being one of the factors and also how busy I get. And also how I plan on to go on with the rest of my life. I could again be the quietest person ever, but really, I'm not. I love to be out and about. I'm still fun. I'm doing Zumba, going to the gym, seeing my gym bros, all that stuff. And that has not changed during my post-grad journey, which I'm really happy. It still makes me happy that I still got this energy that people cannot deny at all. I just love it when people are willing to accept, like, just for being me instead of myself trying to be something that I'm not. connection, it's not just about perfect communication, but of common ground, what interests can be shared, and also what ideas can be shared, and also understanding, again, that not everyone processes ideas the same way. Each one of us processes things differently, and that's the most unique thing you could ever get from someone with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, all those things. Whew, I know I said quite a lot. I still hope that any vlogs that I make or any films that I make would really help someone. It's not just through conveying a message, but also providing some meaning in a way. Like, it's gotta, like, inspire them in a way, in terms of moving someone emotionally, or like kind of draw them in a way. The point is that communication can get difficult at times, especially when our brains don't work the same way. But if we're willing to be patient, ask clear questions, and listening with curiosity, and also giving each other space, we're on the right track. Neurodiversity, in a way, reminds us that there is no single right way to think, feel, or speak. So remember, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Each person navigates the world in their unique way. And that's exactly what makes the connection very powerful. Because, again, I've come to make videos because I don't want to feel like the only person or only girl interested in this material. Like, it could be anyone, like, could be a guy, could be a girl, non-binary, whoever. When I was applying for film school, like, as I've been writing my statements, I've incorporated some, like, personal connection, and also the connection through filmmaking experiences, and also what I'm willing to learn. As much as those questions can get overwhelming at times, there's another trick in terms of finding a way to, like, convey certain words that make it meaningful and also impactful, while still being original and authentic. Again, if you're an educator watching this, or any profession like nurse, doctor, whoever, communication, as much as complex it gets because of how our brains don't operate the same way, you have to be willing to be patient, ask the right questions, listen with curiosity, give space, and also understanding that neurodivergent kids might not process the same things in the same way. They do it in their unique way, but they also can be fun too, and willing to be around with people. Even if they're not, that's totally okay. That's a lot of tips and stuff that I've talked about in this episode, so I really hope that this helped you out as much as it helped me out as a neurodivergent individual myself. This seems like a video essay, pretty much. But, well, not exactly. It's still like a podcast structure. So, like, even my unorthodox way of filmmaking or content making, out of the tradition. And that's what people love. They love that of me. Even my friends, my mentors, just anyone who could relate to those things. Even to people who've been following my journey for a long time. Hopefully this has helped you out as much as they helped me. So it's never too late to learn of neurodivergence, and it's also never too early. Like, it's great to learn at such a young age too, like with anything. Like, even if you're like in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, or even 50s, it's best to know about this stuff, because you never know if you might approach someone who identifies as neurodivergent. Like, who knows, maybe you might share the same interests, ideas, or whatever. So I thank you guys for taking the time to listening to what I have to say, and make sure to subscribe to my channel down below, to my main channel and also my film channel. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next episode of Set the Stage. And until then, please be sure to keep tuning into my vlogs and also the films that I've been making, all those things. I've been coming so far into this journey as a post-grad that's trying to get into film school. And yeah, thank you for listening. Cheers, everyone. Bye.